Welcome to War Bios, the premier podcast for delving into the intricacies of military history's most pivotal conflicts. I'm your host, General Biography, and today we're going to embark on an in-depth examination of one of the medieval period's most decisive battles, the Battle of Hattin. This clash of arms, which took place on July 4, 1187, in the scorching desert landscape of Palestine, marked a turning point in the Crusades, showcasing the tactical genius of Saladin and the crumbling defenses of the Kingdom of Jerusalem. As we set the stage for this epic confrontation, let's journey back to the early days of the Crusader states. The late 12th century was a time of great upheaval in the Holy Land, with Christian kingdoms and Muslim sultanates vying for control over the sacred cities of Jerusalem, Acre, and Damascus. It was against this backdrop that Saladin, the Sultan of Egypt and Syria, began to consolidate his power, forging alliances with the Zengid dynasty and the Fatimid Caliphate. In 1171, Saladin had become the vizier of the Fatimid Caliph, Al-Adid, and after the caliph's death in 1171, he took control of Egypt, uniting it under his rule. The Kingdom of Jerusalem, established in 1099 after the First Crusade, had been facing numerous challenges in the decades leading up to the Battle of Hattin. The kingdom was plagued by internal power struggles, corruption, and a lack of effective leadership. King Guy of Lusignan, who had ascended to the throne in 1186, faced opposition from the powerful noble families of the kingdom, including the Ibelins and the Montferrats. Meanwhile, the Muslim states surrounding the kingdom were becoming increasingly unified under Saladin's leadership, posing a significant threat to the Crusader states. In 1183, Saladin had begun to make overtures towards the Kingdom of Jerusalem, attempting to negotiate a peace treaty with King Guy. However, these efforts ultimately proved unsuccessful, and in 1187, Saladin launched a campaign against the kingdom, aiming to capture the strategic city of Tiberias. The city was defended by a small garrison led by Raymond of Tripoli, a veteran Crusader lord who had long been a thorn in Saladin's side. Despite being outnumbered, Raymond's forces put up a valiant defense, but ultimately they were unable to withstand the might of Saladin's army. On July 2, 1187, Tiberias fell to Saladin, and its capture sent shockwaves throughout the Kingdom of Jerusalem. The city's defenders, including Raymond of Tripoli, were forced to flee, leaving behind their families and possessions. The loss of Tiberias was a devastating blow to the kingdom, and it set the stage for the epic confrontation that would take place just 2 days later at the Battle of Hattin. The year 1187 would prove to be a watershed moment in the history of the Crusades, as the armies of Saladin and Guy of Lusignan prepared to face off in the desert landscape near Hattin. The stage was set for a confrontation that would determine the fate of the Holy Land and shape the course of medieval history. The desert landscape of Palestine will come alive as we recount the bravery, cunning, and ultimately the devastating consequences of this medieval clash of arms. On July 4, 1187, the armies of Saladin and King Guy of Lusignan faced off in the scorching desert landscape near Hattin. The Crusader army, comprising around 20,000 men, was largely composed of heavy cavalry, infantry, and a small contingent of archers. In contrast, Saladin's forces numbered approximately 30,000 soldiers, including a significant proportion of lightly armored horsemen and skilled archers. As the two armies clashed, the Crusaders found themselves at a significant disadvantage due to the harsh desert environment. The blistering heat and lack of water took its toll on the heavily armored knights, who were accustomed to fighting in more temperate climates. Meanwhile, Saladin's forces, well adapted to the local conditions, employed innovative tactics to exploit the weaknesses of their opponents. One notable example of Saladin's tactical genius was his use of a clever feint to lure the Crusader army into a trap. By pretending to retreat, Saladin's forces enticed the Crusaders to pursue them, drawing them further away from the safety of their camp and into the open desert. As the Crusaders gave chase, they became increasingly disorganized and vulnerable to attack. Saladin then unleashed his archers, who rained down a hail of arrows upon the Crusader army, weakening their formation and causing widespread chaos. The lightly armored horsemen, able to move quickly and easily in the desert terrain, outflanked the Crusaders and attacked them from unexpected angles, further exacerbating the disorder. As the battle raged on, the Crusader army became increasingly fragmented, with various units fighting isolated engagements against Saladin's forces. King Guy of Lusignan, realizing the gravity of the situation, attempted to rally his troops and launch a counterattack. However, it was too late. The damage had been done, and the Crusader army was on the brink of collapse. The final blow came when Saladin's forces set fire to the dry grass and brush surrounding the Crusader position, creating a wall of flames that blocked their retreat and funneled them towards the waiting Muslim army. The ensuing massacre was brutal, with thousands of Crusaders cut down by Saladin's triumphant forces. In the aftermath of the battle, Saladin's victory was all but complete. The kingdom of Jerusalem lay in ruins, its armies shattered and its leadership decimated. King Guy of Lusignan, along with many other prominent nobles, was taken prisoner, and the city of Jerusalem itself would soon fall to Saladin's forces. As we reflect on the Battle of Hattin, it becomes clear that this pivotal confrontation marked a turning point in the history of the Crusades. The devastating defeat suffered by the Crusader army had far-reaching consequences, shaping the course of medieval history and cementing Saladin's reputation as one of the greatest military commanders of all time. In the words of the renowned historian Ibn al-Athir, the Battle of Hattin was a day of great calamity for the Franks, and it marked the beginning of their downfall in Syria. This poignant assessment captures the essence of the Battle of Hattin's significance, highlighting its enduring impact on the medieval world. In the immediate aftermath of the battle, Saladin's forces swept through the kingdom of Jerusalem, capturing key cities and strongholds. The city of Jerusalem itself fell to Saladin's army on October 2, 1187, after a brief siege. The Crusader garrison, realizing their situation was hopeless, negotiated a surrender, and the city was handed over to Saladin's forces. The loss of Jerusalem was a crushing blow to the Crusader movement, and it marked the beginning of the end for the Kingdom of Jerusalem. Over the next several years, Saladin's forces continued to push the Crusaders back, capturing key cities such as Acre, Jaffa, and Ashkelon. The Crusaders were eventually forced to retreat to a narrow strip of coastline, where they established a new capital in the city of Tyre. Despite their defeat, the Crusaders refused to give up. In 1191, King Richard the Lionheart of England arrived in the Holy Land, leading a new crusade aimed at retaking Jerusalem and restoring the Kingdom of Jerusalem. However, despite some initial successes, including the capture of Acre, Richard was ultimately unable to achieve his goal. The Third Crusade ended in failure, with Richard negotiating a treaty with Saladin that allowed Christian pilgrims to visit Jerusalem but did not restore Crusader control over the city. The decline of the Crusader states continued over the next several centuries, with the Mamluk Sultanate eventually capturing Acre, the last major Crusader stronghold, in 1291. The fall of Acre marked the end of the Crusader presence in the Holy Land, and it had a profound impact on the course of medieval history. The legacy of the Battle of Hattin can be seen in the modern Middle East, where the conflict between Muslims and Christians continues to shape politics and society. The battle also had a lasting impact on Islamic history, cementing Saladin's reputation as one of the greatest military commanders of all time. In the words of the historian Ibn al-Athir, Saladin was a man of great courage and intelligence, who united the Muslims and led them to victory against their enemies. As we reflect on the Battle of Hattin and its aftermath, it becomes clear that this pivotal confrontation marked a turning point in the history of the Crusades. The devastating defeat suffered by the Crusader army had far-reaching consequences, shaping the course of medieval history and cementing Saladin's reputation as one of the greatest military commanders of all time. In conclusion, the Battle of Hattin was a decisive moment in the history of the Crusades, marking the beginning of the end for the Kingdom of Jerusalem. The legacy of this battle continues to shape the modern Middle East, and it remains an important reminder of the complexities and nuances of medieval history. That's all for today's War Bios. Remember to like, share, and subscribe, and until next time, I'm General Biography, reminding you to keep marching toward victory.